She's been here since yesterday afternoon. That's what the night porter tells Richard Caldwell when he slips through the service entrance of the Meridian Grand Hotel at 2:47 in the morning. Badge swapped out, name tag reading Rick, 2 weeks, of stubble on his jaw, and 30 years of culinary empire invisible in the clothes he's borrowed from his youngest son. Since yesterday afternoon. 12 hours. Maybe more. Richard stops walking. He does the math the way he always does. Automatically, like a reflex. 12 hours on your feet in a commercial kitchen is survivable. 14 is brutal. 16 is something else entirely. Something that separates the people who cook for a living from the people who cook because they cannot imagine doing anything else. He turns the corner into the prep kitchen, and he sees her. A young black woman, maybe 22, maybe 23, standing at the center island under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her chef's coat is damp at the collar. Her natural hair is pulled back tight under a black skull cap. A cutting board the size of a small dining table stretches in front of her, covered in perfect brunoise, tiny cubes of carrot and celery and onion so uniform they look machine cut. Her knife moves in a blur. Her eyes are somewhere else entirely. She doesn't look up when he enters, doesn't flinch, doesn't slow down. She just keeps cutting. Richard Caldwell has eaten at restaurants in 41 countries. He has watched the finest chefs in the world work. He has stood in the kitchen at Noma and watched René Redzepi plate a dish with the focused silence of a man defusing a bomb. He has watched Gordon Ramsay rebuild a failing kitchen in real time. He has stood behind the pass at Per Se and felt the quiet machinery of true excellence. He has never seen anything that looks quite like this. The girl is alone in a kitchen built for 40 people. She has been here since yesterday afternoon. It is almost 3 in the morning, and she is cutting vegetables with the precision of someone who is training for something. Not someone who is tired, not someone who is coasting through a late shift. Someone preparing, sharpening, building towards something he cannot yet see. He has no idea who she is. He has no idea what she knows. In 12 hours, he will be standing in front of a room full of his executives with tears on his face, trying to explain what happened in this kitchen. Trying to explain what he got wrong. Trying to explain why this young woman, this person he walked past in the hallway 100 times without seeing, was about to change the way his entire company thought about talent. But right now it's 2:47 in the morning and he's just Rick, and she doesn't know he exists. So he watches. The Meridian Grand is the flagship property of Caldwell Hospitality Group, which Richard built over 30 years from one 40-seat restaurant in Cincinnati into a collection of 18 hotels and 26 restaurants spanning 9 states. His face appears on the covers of trade magazines. His memoir, Salt and Grit, sold 400,000 copies. He is, by any reasonable measure, a success story. He is also, by his own private admission, out of touch. That's why he's here. Not because anyone told him to be, not because a consultant advised it, because 6 months ago his daughter Simone, who is 26 and refuses to let him get away with anything, sat across from him at Sunday dinner and said something that kept him awake for weeks afterward. "Dad, you haven't worked in a kitchen in 11 years. You talk about your people all the time, but you don't know who your people are anymore." He argued with her. He cited numbers. He cited reviews. He cited the fact that his staff retention rate was above industry average, and his employee satisfaction. Surveys were consistently strong. Simone looked at him the way only daughters can look at their fathers, like she feels sorry for him and loves him anyway. "Surveys tell you what people want you to hear," she said. "Kitchens tell you the truth." So here he is. Rick. Borrowed clothes, real calluses on his hands, still there from a life he stepped out of. Too slowly. He spent the first 3 days scrubbing pots, the next 2 on the prep line. Tonight, he is supposedly here to observe overnight stock preparation. What he is actually doing is watching a young woman cut vegetables at 3 in the morning and trying to figure out why it feels like the most important thing he has seen in years. Her name is Zara Ellis. He won't learn that for another 2 hours. What he learns first is her knife work. A chef's knife tells you almost everything about a cook. How they hold it tells you their training. How they move it tells you their confidence. How they treat it tells you their philosophy. Zara Ellis holds her knife like it belongs to her body. Not tight, not loose. Exactly right. The grip of someone who has held one so many times that the decision is no longer conscious. She moves through the brunoise at a pace that shouldn't be possible at this hour, after this many hours, without a single cut that isn't exact. Richard picks up a piece of carrot from the edge of the board. He doesn't say anything, just measures it between his fingers, 4 millimeters on every side. Perfect. She notices him for the first time, looks up. Her eyes don't show surprise exactly, more like assessment. She is deciding in a single second what category of person he is and how much attention to give him. "You're the new floater," she says. "Rick, right?" "That's right." He sets the carrot back down. "Those are beautiful." She goes back to cutting. "Thank you. How long have you been at it tonight?" She checks the clock on the wall. 14 hours, give or take. He lets a moment pass. "Mind if I ask why?" Zara pauses. Not the cutting. Her hands keep moving, but something behind her eyes pauses. Like she is deciding whether to give him the real answer or the convenient one. She gives him the real one. Maybe because it's 3 in the morning and the walls people, billed during daylight hours, come down in the small hours. Maybe because he asks simply, without an agenda she can detect. Maybe because she has been alone in this kitchen for 14 hours and the question lands differently when there is no audience to perform for. "Sunday service," she says. "We had a private event booked for a party of 80. Black tie. The guest of honor is the CEO of some company, doesn't matter which one. The event planner calls at noon, says the original chef, Marcus, had a family emergency and they're scrambling." She pauses. "I volunteered to run it." Richard nods slowly. "That's a big ask." Zara's knife keeps moving. "I know. I'm still a prep cook. Technically. So I needed to do all my assigned prep for the week before I could focus on the event menu." She looks at the board. "This is what's left." He does the math again. She ran an 80-person black tie dinner as a prep cook. Before that, she completed a full week's worth of assigned prep. And now, at nearly 3 in the morning, she is still going. "How did the dinner go?" he asks. A small smile crosses her face. The first one he has seen. "Standing ovation," she says. "The guest of honor asked to meet the chef." She goes quiet for a second. They were surprised. I could tell. But the food stood for itself. She doesn't have to finish that sentence. Richard finishes it in his head. They were surprised because she was young, because she was a woman, because she was black, because none of those things matched the image they carried in their minds of who belongs behind a knife at a black tie event. The food stood for itself. He lets the silence sit between them. Zara keeps cutting. He goes back to watching. At 4:15 in the morning, she puts the knife down for the first time. She wipes the blade on a clean towel, folds it exactly twice, sets it next to the board. She rolls her neck, rolls her shoulders. Then she opens the walk-in cooler and disappears inside. Richard follows her, which she allows, which tells him something. Inside the walk-in, organized to a standard he has not seen in any of his properties in a long time, she pulls a small container from the second shelf, opens it, hands it to him. He takes a spoonful. It's a sauce. Miso-based, he thinks at first, but there's something under the miso, something warm and floral that takes him a full 5 seconds to identify. "Osmanthus," he says. She looks at him properly for the first time. Not the casual glance she gave him before, a real look. Reconsidering. "You know Osmanthus?" she says. "I cooked in Chengdu for a summer when I was 24, he tells her. 30 years ago. Nobody at this hotel would know that. Rick the floater is nobody." She takes the container back, tastes it herself, makes a small adjustment in her mind that he can see but not hear. "It's for Sunday's tasting menu," she says. "If they let me run one." She says if the way someone says it who has heard no enough times to stop assuming yes. "You're developing a tasting menu?" Richard says carefully. "On your own time?" She looks at him like the question is strange. "What else would I do with my time?" She puts the container back. The menu I'm building has 7 courses. Each one uses a primary ingredient that's sourced within 50 miles of the hotel. She closes the cooler door. I've been working on it for 4 months. He stands very still. 4 months, 7 courses, local sourcing. Tasting menus in hotels are notoriously difficult. The margins are thin, the execution demands are enormous. The guest education required is significant. Experienced chefs with decades of credentials pitch ideas like this. Ideas like this come with PowerPoint decks and business cases and resumes. They do not typically come from prep cooks at 4 in the morning in walk-in coolers. Why hasn't anyone seen this? He asks. Zara gives him a look he will remember for a long time. Quiet, not bitter. Just truthful. I'm a prep cook, Rick, she says. Who's looking? He goes back the next night, and the night after that, she is there both times. Not always in the prep kitchen. Once he finds her in the pastry station, reviewing a lamination technique she has been teaching herself from library books. Actual library books, dog-eared and flour-dusted, stacked on the shelf above her station. Once he finds her in the walk-in again, reorganizing the labeling system that 3 different departments use inconsistently, creating a single unified format that will, she explains without being asked, reduce spoilage by an estimated 12%, she is estimating. She has been tracking the numbers herself, in a notebook, which she keeps in her locker. On the 3rd night, he asks her the question he has been carrying since the first one. How did you end up here? She takes a moment. Not hesitation, Zara Ellis does not seem like someone who hesitates. More like she is selecting the version of the story that is honest without being more than he needs to hear. I was supposed to go to culinary school, she says. Johnson and Wales. I got in. Scholarship covered 60%. She wipes down the prep station she just finished. Took me 3 years to get to a place where I could apply. My mom got sick my junior year of high school. Lupus. Not a death sentence, but close enough to one that everything changes. She looks at the counter, not at him. I was the oldest. My dad worked doubles at the plant, so I cooked. She pauses. Not like trained cooking, like keeping people alive cooking. Monday, it's whatever's in the freezer. Tuesday, it's whatever's on sale. Wednesday, it's make it stretch. She almost smiles. But you learn things that way. You learn what heat does to protein when you don't have money to waste getting it wrong. You learn stock because bones are cheap. You learn seasoning because seasoning is free. Richard says nothing. He is listening the way he should have been listening for years. By the time my mom was stable enough for me to leave, she continues, the scholarship timeline had passed. I reapplied, got in again. Partial scholarship this time, no funding for living expenses. She looks up at him. Do you know what culinary school costs if you have to pay for housing and food and materials on top of tuition? She says it without accusation. Just math. Just the numbers that shaped her life. He knows. He has signed enough tuition checks for corporate training programs to know. I figured I'd learn faster working than sitting in a classroom anyway, she says. So I took the prep job, 18 months ago. She looks at the knife roll on the counter. I haven't stopped since. What are you working toward? He asks. Executive chef, she says, immediately. No qualifications, no hedging. Here? She looks at him steadily. Here first. Then my own place. He studies her face. 22 years old, self-taught, running on 4 hours of sleep and an architecture of ambition that most people twice her age couldn't sustain. Standing in a kitchen that has no idea what it's holding. He has one more question. He's been holding it back because it feels presumptuous, even though he already knows the answer. The tasting menu, he says. Have you shown it to anyone? She is. Quiet for a moment. I tried, she says. Chef Marcus. 6 months ago. She straightens the knife roll. He was polite about it, said it was ambitious, said prep cooks develop knife skills, not concepts. She says it without anger. Matter of fact, the way you say something you've had time to make peace with. I went back to work. Richard Caldwell nods slowly. He goes home at 5:30 in the morning and doesn't sleep. On the 5th day, something breaks. He is on the hotline during lunch prep, which is where Rick the Floater has been assigned since day 3. The head chef on duty is a man named Daniel Frost, 38 years old, 11 years with the company. Richard hired him personally, liked his precision and his reputation. Still does, mostly. But today he watches Daniel do something that lodges in his chest like a splinter. Zara is at her station. She has been running prep without stopping. During a brief lull, she approaches Daniel with a question about the weekend specials. A specific ask about whether they could substitute a particular heritage grain she has sourced from a farm 20 miles north. Daniel doesn't look up from the tickets. "Zara," he says, "stay in your lane." She goes back to her station. No argument, no visible flinch. She goes back and she keeps working and her face shows nothing. Richard watches this from across the line. He watches it the way he has been watching everything for 5 days, carefully, without intervening, because that is the deal he made with himself. Observe. Don't fix. Understand the system before you try to change it. But this one sits differently. Stay in your lane. 3 words that mean, your ideas don't matter here. Your lane is the cutting board. Your lane is the prep list. Your lane is the invisible labor that makes everything else possible. And you are to remain invisible inside it. He watches Zara at her station for the rest of the service. Her hands never slow down. Her work never suffers. Whatever is happening, inside her, and something is happening. He can feel it from 20 feet away. It does not show in her knife work, in her prep, in the extraordinary discipline with which she executes a job that is far below what she is capable of. That evening, before the dinner service ramps up, he finds her in the stairwell. She is sitting on the 3rd step, back straight, eating a bowl of staff meal and reviewing handwritten notes from her notebook. She doesn't startle when he sits down next to her. "How do you do it?" he asks. She looks at him sideways. "Do what?" "Stay." He says it simply. "When someone talks to you like that," she finishes, a bite, considers the question seriously. "Because leaving doesn't serve the goal," she says. She looks at her notes. "I've been in this building for 18 months. In that time, I've learned the walk-in organization patterns of 3 different departments, the vendor relationships for 12 product categories, the service patterns for every dining outlet, the preferences of 43 regular guests by name, the cost ratios on the 6 most profitable menu items, and the exact 3 reasons the Sunday brunch numbers have been declining for 2 years. She closes the notebook. "Where am I going to learn that by leaving?" He is quiet for a moment. She's not describing survival. She is describing strategy. She is playing a longer game than anyone in this building knows. She is building, from the inside, an understanding of this operation so thorough that no one can dismiss her when the moment comes. Because when the moment comes, she will not be pitching a concept. She will be presenting a solution to problems they don't yet know she knows about. "Do you know who I am?" he asks. She looks at him. "Rick the Floater," she says. "Who does mornings in the storeroom and evenings on the hotline and asks too many questions." He almost smiles. "Just those?" She tilts her head. "And you know what osmanthus is." She pauses. "And you hold a knife like someone who held one before it was fashionable." He reaches into his pocket. He sets his real badge, the one that says Richard, Caldwell, CEO, Caldwell Hospitality Group, on the step between them. She looks at it, looks at him. Her expression does not change the way he expected it to. She doesn't blanch, doesn't scramble, doesn't apologize for anything she has said in the past 5 days. She looks at the badge for a long moment. Then she looks back at her notebook. Then she opens it to a specific page and holds it out to him. The page is headed, CHG Meridian Grand, Structural Inefficiencies, observed Jan May. Below that, 7 sections, densely written. Staff allocation. During non-peak hours. Vendor consolidation opportunities. Menu item costing errors. Guest experience gaps in the late-night dining window. walk-in turnover rates by category, spoilage tracking protocol failures, and at the bottom of the page, underlined twice, tasting menu concept as revenue diversification, ROI projection attached. The next page is the ROI projection. Built by hand. Assumptions documented. Comparable properties cited. He reads every word. He reads it twice. He does not speak for a long time. Zara finishes her staff meal, closes the container, sits beside him and waits, because she has learned how to wait. Finally, he looks up. "How long have you been building this?" he asks. 14 months, she says. The last 4 have just been the tasting menu. He looks at her. 22 years old, no degree, no credential, no title above prep cook. And in her hands, a business analysis of his property that his highest paid operations consultants, the people who charge $400 an hour and arrive with matching luggage and LinkedIn profiles full of endorsements, have not produced in 3 years. "You know what you have here?" he says. "Yes," she says simply. "Why hasn't anyone seen it?" She gives him the same look she gave him in the walk-in, the first time he asked a question like this. Quiet. Truthful. Without bitterness, because bitterness is something she cannot afford. "I'm a prep cook," she says. "Who's looking?" The next morning, Richard Caldwell calls his assistant from the parking garage. He is still in his borrowed clothes. He has not slept. His voice, when he speaks, is the voice of a man who has found something he did not know he had lost. "Clear my week," he says. "I need the executive team at the Meridian Grand by Thursday. All of them." Full day. His assistant pauses. "Is everything all right?" "It is now," he says. He hangs up. Sits in the parking garage for a while. He thinks about Simone, who told him that surveys don't tell you the truth, that kitchens do. He thinks about the fact that he has 18 properties and he doesn't know how many Zara Ellises are in them. How many people with notebooks full of solutions are standing at cutting boards being told to stay in their lane? How many culinary school letters went unanswered because the scholarship timeline didn't survive a mother's illness? How many standing ovations at black tie dinners ended with a surprised guest of honor who expected someone else? He thinks about the carrot. 4 millimeters on every side. Perfect. He thinks about what it takes to produce that level of precision at 3 in the morning. After 14 hours on your feet, what kind of internal architecture you have to be running on. What kind of commitment to excellence that no one is requiring you to have, that no one is even witnessing, that you are maintaining entirely for yourself, because your goal is real, to you even when it is invisible to everyone else. He picks up the phone again. "Daniel Frost," he says when Daniel answers. "This is Richard Caldwell." A long pause. "Sir, I didn't know you were." "I know," Richard says. "Thursday morning, I need Zara Ellis in the room with the executive team, not as staff, as a presenter." Another pause. "She's a prep cook, sir." Richard closes, his eyes for a second. "I know what her title says," he answers. "Thursday morning, 9 o'clock. Make sure she has everything she needs." Thursday arrives the way consequential days always do, looking from the outside like any other morning. The executive team assembles in the Meridian Grand's boardroom on the 4th floor. 8 people who have each spent decades in hospitality. They have PowerPoints and quarterly reports and the easy confidence of people who are used to being the smartest person in whatever room they occupy. Zara Ellis walks in last. She is wearing her chef's coat. Not because she didn't have options. She did, Richard made sure of it. But because she is a chef, and that is what she wears, and she is not here to perform someone else's idea of what she should look like. Her notebook is tucked under one arm. Her hands are still. Her expression is the one he has come to recognize over 5 days. Focused, ready, patient. The room registers her in the way rooms register things that don't match expectation. A small, collective recalibration. Eyes moving to Richard. Back to her. Back to Richard. He stands. "Ladies and gentlemen," he says, "this is Zara Ellis. She has been a prep cook at this property for 18 months. She's also the most analytically sophisticated person in this building, and you're about to understand why I believe that. He sits down. She opens her notebook. She speaks for 40 minutes. She walks them through every section of her analysis. No slides, no presentation software, just handwritten notes and the kind of clarity that comes from knowing something so well you can explain it to anyone. She cites specific dates, specific numbers, specific vendors. She references guest patterns by meal period and season. She explains the tasting menu concept not as a creative idea but as a margin strategy, articulating how a 7-course locally sourced tasting menu positions the property in a market segment that 3 comparable hotels within 12 miles have failed to enter. She is not nervous. That is the thing Richard keeps watching. She is not nervous because she has been preparing for this moment for 14 months without knowing exactly when it would come, and preparation is not something that leaves room for nerves. When she finishes, the room is quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something real has just happened. The CFO, a man named Gerald Park who has been with the company for 9 years and is not given to sentiment, is looking at the ROI projection she has passed around the table. He runs a number on his phone. Runs it again. These assumptions are defensible, he says. Not to her, to the room. Then he looks at her. How did you build this? She looks back at him steadily. I tracked the numbers myself. For 14 months. From your prep station. From wherever I was. She doesn't say it with attitude, just with the simplicity of someone describing a fact. The head of operations, a woman named Patricia Nguyen, who has spent 20 years solving problems in restaurants, is reading the section on spoilage protocols. I've been trying to get this fixed for 8 months, she says quietly, more to herself than to the table. She looks up at Zara. Do you know what happened every time I brought it up with the kitchen team? Zara nods. They told you it was already being tracked, she says, and technically it is. But the tracking system uses 3 different date formats across departments, which means the data can't be consolidated, which means the trend analysis is impossible, which means no one ever sees the pattern. She pauses. I've already drafted a standardization template. It's in the appendix. Patricia Nguyen opens the appendix. She stares at it for a moment. Then she says very quietly, How are you still a prep cook? The question hangs in the air. Zara looks at her. A look that is not an answer but contains one. A look that says, You know how. Richard clears his throat. He has been waiting for this moment. He had a speech prepared. He doesn't use it. Zara, he says, I'd like to offer you the position of junior executive chef with a development track toward executive chef within 18 months. The tasting menu will be green-lit as a pilot program with a dedicated budget. You'll work with Patricia on the operational reforms, and the company will cover culinary credentialing if and when you decide you want it, on your terms and your timeline. He pauses. I also want to say something else. He looks at her and then at the room and then back at her. I've been running this company for 30 years, and I walked past someone like you for 18 months. That is a failure of leadership. Not yours. Mine. The room is very quiet. Zara Ellis is quiet for a moment too, then she opens her notebook to a fresh page. When do we start? She says. 6 months later, the Meridian Grand launches its first tasting menu, 7 courses, 7 local farms. The menu changes every 6 weeks. The amuse-bouche is a single sip of consommé with a floating osmanthus blossom, which sounds simple and takes 3 days to perfect. The first night is a Saturday. 14 covers. Critics in 3 of the seats without anyone knowing, because Zara did not want to know. She wanted to cook the meal she cooked, not the meal she would cook if she knew she was being watched. The review that runs 11 days later calls the menu the most quietly confident debut in the city's recent dining history. It calls the consommé stunning. It calls the chef a force of unusual clarity. The reviewer asks, in the final paragraph, where Zara Ellis trained. The answer gets picked up by food publications in 4 cities. Self-taught. former prep cook. Started cooking at 16 to keep her family fed. The story spreads the way stories spread when they contain something people recognize as true. Not just true about her. True about how many people carry that much brilliance in rooms where nobody is looking. The reservations fill up 6 weeks out, then 8, then 10. Daniel Frost, who told Zara to stay in her lane, transfers to another property. He does not request a reference from Richard Caldwell. Richard Caldwell does not offer one. Gerald Park integrates Zara's cost analysis across 4 additional properties. The spoilage protocol standardization alone saves the company $340,000 in the first fiscal year. Patricia Nguyen calls Zara directly when she encounters a new operational problem, a habit that began 6 weeks after Thursday's meeting and has not stopped since. Zara's mother comes to the tasting menu's first service. She arrives in the best dress she owns, which Zara did not tell her to wear. She sits at the chef's counter with a view of the open kitchen. She watches her daughter work. After the third course, Zara comes around the counter for a moment. She does not make a speech. She does not do anything dramatic. She just leans down and says something in her mother's ear. Later, when Richard asks her what she said, she is quiet for a moment. "I told her this is why we held on," she says. She goes back to her kitchen. Richard Caldwell does not tell this story publicly for 3 months. When he finally does, on a panel at a national hospitality conference, the room is full of people who run hotels and restaurants and who think about talent the way they think about real estate. In terms of credentials and pedigree and the right addresses on a resume, he tells them about the knife, the perfect brunoise at 3 in the morning, the osmanthus consommé, the notebook, the 14 months of tracking spoilage data from a prep station. He tells them about the moment he set his badge on the step in the stairwell. He tells them that the most important question he has asked in his career is one. He asked in borrowed clothes with 3 weeks of stubble on his face, sitting next to a young woman eating staff meal from a container. "How do you stay?" And he tells them her answer, because leaving doesn't serve the goal. He tells them he has 18 properties and that after the Meridian Grand he spent 4 months visiting every one of them. Not as the CEO, as someone paying attention. Looking at the people who were there before dawn and after midnight. Looking at the people whose ideas got politely dismissed and who went back to their stations and kept working. Looking for the notebooks. He found 6 of them. 6 people across his properties who were doing what Zara did, building in the margins of jobs that underestimated them, solutions to problems that companies 3 times their size would pay handsomely to solve. 3 of them were black women. He promotes all 6. He also creates something he calls the Caldwell Open Door, a direct submission channel for any employee at any level to surface an idea, an observation, or a concern, reviewed monthly by a rotating panel that includes himself. No hierarchy, no filter, no Daniel Frost telling anyone to stay in their lane. In the first month, the channel receives 340 submissions across his 18 properties. He reads every one. Zara Ellis is 23 years old when she receives her executive chef certification from the James Beard Foundation's Emerging Leaders Program, which Richard's Foundation underwrites at her request for first-generation hospitality professionals. She does not need the credential. She has the kitchen. She has the reviews. She has the numbers. But she wants it on paper, she tells him, because there are other people like her who are going to need to see that it is possible to get it on paper without having started at the right address. She earns it in 6 months, one of the fastest completions in the program's history. The night she gets the letter, she is in the Meridian Grand's prep kitchen. It is 11 p.m. She is working on the new spring menu. Her knife is moving the way it always moves, the blur that looks effortless and isn't. The precision that looks natural and was built minute by minute over years of choosing this when she could have chosen something easier. One of the night porters tells her there's a card at the front desk for her. She reads it, puts it in her coat pocket, goes back to work. Later, when the porter asks what it said, she smiles. "It's from my mom," she says. She keeps cutting. She told me she always knew. There is a young woman somewhere tonight who is doing what Zara did. She is working a job that doesn't know what it's holding. She is building toward something in the margins, in the early mornings, in the notebooks, in the 14-hour shifts that nobody asked her to work and that she works anyway because the goal is real to her even when it is invisible to everyone else. No one is looking. Or they are looking and they don't see her because she doesn't look like what they expect to see. This is the thing Richard Caldwell says at the end of his conference. Panel, the room is quiet. He is not reading from notes. We talk a lot about finding talent, he says. What we don't talk about is why we keep not finding it, why it keeps being found, or not found, along the lines we know to look. He pauses. I walked past Zara Ellis for 18 months. Not because she wasn't there, not because she wasn't extraordinary, because I wasn't looking at the right things, because I was looking for talent that arrives looking like talent, that announces itself with credentials and connections and the right resume. He is quiet for a moment. Real talent sometimes looks like a prep cook at 3 a.m. cutting carrots that nobody asked her to cut perfectly. Real talent sometimes looks like a notebook full of solutions to problems you didn't know you had. Real talent sometimes stays in a lane it was told to stay in. Not because it belongs there, but because it's playing a longer game than you know, because it's waiting for someone to finally look. He sets his notes on the podium. My job, he says, is to be the person who finally looks. He walks off the stage. 3 rows back, Simone Caldwell, 26 years old, who told her father that kitchens tell you the truth and who has never once let him get away with anything, is watching with her arms folded. She nods once. Good, she says, to no one in particular. That's enough. Did this story move you? Hit subscribe to never miss another story about the people who are building extraordinary things in rooms where nobody is looking. Share this with someone who needs to hear that the goal is worth staying for, even when the lane feels too small. Because somewhere right now someone is cutting vegetables at 3 a.m, building towards something the world doesn't know about yet. That person deserves to be seen.